Colleagues and I held a press conference where we talked about all the good ideas being left on the table compared to those ideas to some of the more ridiculous measures being considered in this building instead. It's true that we're ignoring serious reform legislation and prioritizing things like banning cat declawing or taking pronouns out of state statutes referencing children. It's really ridiculous that we can't even take 5 minutes to address our virtually insurmountable pension debt, and yet state staff and state resources are being used to purge pronouns out of state statutes pertaining to kids. Think about this, how silly that is. What we have going on in Illinois is the equivalent of a patient going to the doctor for a broken leg and instead being treated for indigestion. We have tremendous problems facing our state, and instead of dealing with issues that matter, our leaders are focused on nonsense and symbolism, gestures accomplishing nothing. But there is more to this story than just the inane, trite legislation being pushed over meaningful reforms. Instead of addressing long-term problems facing our state, we are making these problems even worse. According to IRS data, Illinois lost more than 100,000 families last couple years. And I tell this story every time I get a chance. In my district, a heating and air guy, friend of mine, has a heating and air business, okay? If I hired him to put in a unit in my house that cost $10,000, his competitor in Missouri can come over and underbid him by $1,300 to $1,400. And the reason he's able to do that is because the cost of business in our state is more than in Missouri. When it comes to unemployment insurance, workers' compensation insurance, and liability insurance, all those things are higher in our state than in neighboring states. As a result, the cost of doing business gets run up in our state. We cannot compete. There are reasons why people are leaving our state, and those are a few of them. And I don't care if it's a heating and air business or if you're making widgets inside, interior in this state. The cost of doing business is higher here, and we have got to get things under control if we're going to compete on a national basis. Thanks. Who's up? Brad. Okay.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Brad Halbrook, the 107th from Shelbyville. One of the ways the majority of party is making our state worse is the incessant spending. Governor Bruce Rauner's last budget was $38.5 billion in 2018. According to some estimate, this year's budget is to be around $50 billion or more. There is no restraint when it comes to the state of Illinois spending. Just prior to the Easter break, the House passed 22 bills subject to appropriation. The vast majority of the bills have no dollar amount or an undefined dollar amount attached to them. There's only about 9 bills with a dollar amount, and that amounts to nearly $400 million in new spending. The other 13 bills will only add to that total. Some estimates will reach $1 billion. And this spending doesn't even hold a candle to the spending for health care for illegal immigrants. The FY 24 estimate for the state's health benefits program for illegal immigrants is estimated to cost nearly $1 billion. This is a $750 million increase from FY 23. In other words, the estimates of this program, whether unintentionally or intentionally, are substantially off. Where are we going to get nearly $1 billion to pay for the health care costs for illegals? Illinois is being run to the ground. My colleagues and I have offered up numerous solutions to the state's financial crisis, but these measures to reform our state never even get a hearing. One measure introduced this year was HB 2986, which limits the growth of state spending to the rate of growth of the Illinois median household income. Of course, this bill never saw the light of day. None of these common sense reforms even get a hearing, let alone a vote. Our state is burning, all the while our leaders are focused to make sure that we have gender-neutral pronouns in state statutes. This is not a way to run a state. It's time to focus on the issues that are important to the future of the state and most of all important to the people of Illinois that sent us here to represent them. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Illinois' house is burning to the ground, all the while Governor Pritzker and the majority party are smoking in bed. Thank you. And with that, Representative Caucus.
Thank you, Brad. My name's Dan Caucus. I represent the 88th House District out of Decatur. We want to talk today about two things that we don't hear even mentioned in these last days or this year. One, the elephant in the room is we talk about every year pension reform. Not one word has been spoken about pension reform. All we continue to do is pile up debt. We get farther and farther behind in our pension plan, and it's sometime, and it could be within the next 10 to 12 years, things are going to be very bad for our pensioners. We've got to address pension reform in this budget, and we're not hearing a word about it. The other subject that we've been talking about since day one, since we first got here, is ethics reform. None of us have heard the subject, the word ethics mentioned. We see it in the press. Thank you very much for covering. We see the Madigan trials going on. We see people being investigated. There's another investigation going on in Chicago with the guy that supposedly took $5,000 from a contractor. Not one of us in this House, but it is a systemic problem in Illinois. We need to address ethics reform. The people of Illinois have lost confidence in their elected leaders. So two other things that we'll not hear about in this session in the next 3 weeks. And it's dragging the state down. So anyone else? Be happy to take questions if you'd like.
Ethics reform, was there a bill that you put forward for this year?
I think we put forward 5 bills. The bills are out here. We've filed legislation, we filed bills on ethics reform, and they never get a hearing. Yeah, there's several bills, particularly becoming a lobbyist, the revolving door. It's strengthening the legislative inspector general ability to address complaints. It goes on and on and on.
LIG, Mr. Judge McCuskey, does he have your support for another term? Seems like people approved of him.
I don't think we have much of a say in it, but I certainly would like to have a conversation with him. You know, we lost the lady that preceded him because of the lack of ethics reform, the lack of the ability. And Blaine, you want to address that? This is somebody you know.
Yeah, I mean, the previous LIG, it's well known. She resigned saying, quote, that our watered down ethics reform that we did a couple of years ago was a paper tiger. The LIG office was a paper tiger. As far as having confidence in the current one, until you put processes in place that give them some independence and allow them to actually start an investigation, in the General Assembly without the approval of the Legislative Ethics Commission, I think it's really, really hard to pass a judgment on that office, operating under the current conditions. But we've put forward all kinds of anti-corruption measures. We've been doing this for years. As far as economic disclosures, did a little bit of that in the last General Assembly. But the biggest thing is we need real watchdogs in this House. Because we don't have that right now with the LIG and the situation that it is. So, there's nothing in here that prevents conflicts of interest, that makes a politician work for the people and not for their own, future best interests or current best interests. So there's a lot of things that we need to do in that regard. But, as far as, setting up an environment to bring people back into this state, number one, we've got to restore confidence in this state that, people can do business here and, without government interference or government corruption or cronyism, the things that Illinois is known for. But, if we're gonna do things that we say we want to do, like properly fund education and, be attractive to job creators, we've got to really tackle some systemic issues. And Dan hit on it. We're never going to lower property taxes or fund education the way that we want to fund it until we deal with the two things in my mind: the pension crisis and the sheer volume of government in this state. We got way too many taxing bodies taxing way too much and having way too much control over this state. And that's just, between that and our regulatory environment, why would you want to invest here if you can look around at some of the other states that offer some of the advantages, not all of the advantages that Illinois has? What we want to do is set up a system, do some smart deregulation, tackle some of these big issues, get in the middle of the pack on some of this regulatory environment, and the natural advantages of this state will take over, and we will be on a course to be prosperous again.
So you're here obviously to get your message out to the broader public. What's the conversation within leadership of your party, of your House caucus? Obviously, leadership's not here, so is there a stopper there somewhere, or?
Conversations I have with leadership they're in favor of reforms. Okay, it's not leadership on our side. It's leadership on the other side. We could have the best ideas in the world. I'm at a little bit of a disadvantage. This is only my second term. First term, nobody listens to you. Now I have people listening to me. It's just part of the process, of learning curve. I understand that. But the reforms that I would like to see pertain to businesses. Like I said, we have people clamoring here every session for tax breaks, this, that. In our district. We have people wanting to put in TIF districts all the time. Well, why do they do that? Nobody asks why. And the reason is because they're at an economic disadvantage. Okay, so if we can make some reforms, they wouldn't have to come to us every session for some tax break, and they wouldn't have to knock on the door of City Hall to form some TIF district. We're in favor of that. Our leadership's in favor of that, from what I understand. We've got to get people on the other side to understand why we're at an economic disadvantage as opposed to Missouri or Indiana. And I'm not saying we got to, give the farm away, but we need some reform.
Workers' comp, then, is that just a matter of making it more difficult to sue, or what does that reform look like?
It's going to, with the benefits that we pay out, that employers have to pay out, and some additional. I'm not a work comp attorney. So these are conversations that I'm having with employers to see what we can do. And I plan on having conversations with some people on the other side to see if we can get some things moving. I know there are some businessmen on the other side. I don't know what kind of voice they have in their caucus, but if we can get a couple of years, and then maybe we can start there.
I've heard, I don't know, senators like Chapin Rose talking about this for 10 years. What's the stopper? Is it just what do you think is in the way of workers' comp reform?
Trial attorneys, maybe?
Very powerful special interest.
Yeah, right. Anytime you put forth the bill, as soon as it hits, you got somebody calling you, hey, we oppose that, we support that. So I think trial attorneys are a big one when it comes to workers' compensation.
What do unemployment reforms look like from your perspective?
Well, those get paid out. If you're laid off, there's a time period in which you're paid. You have to search for jobs. I think we can shorten the period. This economy right now. How many businesses do you know that have help wanted signs up? Every place I go, every city I drive through, help wanted. So why can't we shorten that period that unemployment benefits are paid out? That would reduce your premium, for starters.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you all
Thanks.
very much.